Peter, it's nice to meet you.
Likewise, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Man, I'm super excited to have you on because I follow athletes.org and I saw you were featured on that. And I read some articles about your story. I wore my green and white. Unfortunately, it is Notre Dame colors. I'm a Notre Dame
It's
fan.
all good.
However, you probably know that you play for one of the schools that I, as a fan, fear the most in
Yep.
Marshall. you, you probably know about that. Y'all in NIU. I fear no other schools, but I mean, it just that's why college football is so great, man.
Absolutely. They talk about that to this day.
Really?
It's yeah, especially a lot of the alumni, they work in the sports department, either in ticketing or former players and stuff. So they remember that game and how big of a moment it was for especially like a group of five school like Marshall to go into, play at Notre Dame and come out with a win is pretty remarkable. So yeah, they definitely still talk about it to this day. But
Yeah. Yeah, I would too. I mean, it was a great game. Like Marshall, y'all played absolutely outstanding. That's the thing. Like I love Marshall. We Are Marshall, Matthew McConaughey, phenomenal movie. Also you got Randy Moss.
yep,
Like it's such a cool school to root for, and then y'all had to beat us at home, man.
it happens. It happens to the best of us. That's like you said. That's a great part about college football. You really never know on any given day. Somebody could win. NIU did it. We did
Yep.
it. It happened. You see it all the time.
Yeah, I see it all the time as a Notre Dame fan, unfortunately. Uh, how has your transition going from Oklahoma to Marshall been?
Yeah. So I mean, I would say, definitely it's different, I would say the area compared to like Norman, Oklahoma, Huntington, West Virginia, it's pretty much similar, I would say, from a campus perspective, things are spread out. It's there, a lot of people are country people, hard-nosed workers. The only really difference, from a terrain aspect is Oklahoma's one of the flattest states, and then you come to West Virginia and there's mountains and stuff. But the transition, this is going into my second year at Marshall. Obviously, when you're in the transfer portal, you don't really know where you're going to end up. There's a lot of
Mhm.
question marks um, with, where you're going to land, how you're going to move all your stuff. I had to pack up all my stuff from Oklahoma, U-Haul across the country, and then, you're kind of just playing the waiting game. But, honestly, the transition, it went pretty smoothly, as it could be. The transfer port, obviously, just trying to find a place to live. There's a lot of things about, I would say, transferring that you don't think about, especially logistically, like how you're going to move all your stuff.
Mhm.
So that you kind of got to go through a little growing pains at first, but once you get on campus, once you get to know the guys and get into a flow, you really do feel like a family. You feel that brotherhood. A place like Marshall has a special story. It's like no other. Literally from a tragedy to now. What Marshall's been able to build is quite impressive. So obviously, there's going to be differences, coming from the SEC to a group of five. But I would say, the transition's been smooth. I've been having a great experience here, and I'm excited for my fifth year, and to have a successful year, hopefully win a Sun Belt championship. So
Let's go, man. Let's go. So for listeners who may have not read up on your story, can you take us back to before your college football career, and what you've had to overcome?
absolutely. So I would probably to go all the way back. I would say it really started like right before I entered kindergarten. I was probably like, I don't know, 5 years old whenever you enter kindergarten. And I was a really healthy baby. I love to be outdoors, play with friends. And then I just started to experience some symptoms, with stomach pain, just throwing up after a lot of meals, just a lot of really harsh symptoms as a young kid. I didn't really, I didn't know what was going on with me. I was really young. All you want to do as a kid is just play, be with your friends, And I was definitely struggling. I just remember going to countless doctor's appointments, and just trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Because basically after every meal, I would be throwing up, and there would, you would go to doctors to be like, I don't really know what's wrong with him. So, as time went on, they eventually decided on, I remember it like it was yesterday, the 100th day of kindergarten. I remember that because at least at my elementary school, that was like a big day that you celebrated. I don't know, people brought in, cookies and stuff, and you colored pictures, and you did all this fun stuff as a little kid. But I remember I went there for a half day, so I went, and then my mom and dad picked me up, and we went to the hospital. And that's when they wanted to do an endoscopy and colonoscopy, and make me go under anesthesia to kind of see what all the inflammation, what was wrong with me. Prior to that, I had been to doctor's appointments, and they thought I had celiac disease, which is pretty common now, but back then, 20 years ago, it was pretty rare to have celiac. So, a couple doctors kind of knew, but nobody was really for certain. And basically, so I went under, anesthesia, and basically what happened is I coded. So for people that don't know what that means, it's like I stopped breathing for a certain amount of time, and they basically were able to find out a lot of issues that I had at the time. I had a slight, a slight heart defect early on that, obviously isn't an issue anymore and grew out of and doesn't exist. And then they figured out I had asthma, and then they figured out I had celiac. So basically, I coded. I don't remember how long I didn't breathe for, but I was definitely, it was a scary moment. Looking back on it, especially when I asked my parents, because I don't remember that type of moment, but my parent, speaking for my mom and my dad, how scary that truly was. Your kid goes into an endoscopy, colonoscopy, and ultimately, you don't really know what's going on. There's loud noises, lots of beeping. So, looking back on it, it was definitely a tough experience for just my family as a whole, especially, my parents, that unpredictability happening, at the hospital is definitely scary. So I was diagnosed with celiac disease. Basically, I figured that out through the endoscopy and colonoscopy. But prior to that, just for some more background information, I did a bunch of blood panels, and it said that I didn't have celiac. Like I came back negative every time. So that ultimately led them to doing the endoscopy and colonoscopy to rule out that I actually had celiac disease because all the doctors believed it. So, basically when I was diagnosed with that, my family and I, we cut out so many different things in my diet. I went strict, just gluten free. And I was doing really, really, really well. Probably until I would say maybe third grade, I started to have a few more symptoms of something else. I started to get this sensation that I had food stuck in my throat, essentially. Um, and I couldn't swallow foods. I was like drooling a lot. I couldn't keep anything down. And ultimately, they figured out I had EOE, or eosinophilic esophagitis, which is another, rare disease. So basically, for people that don't know what that is, it's when eosinophils, which are a certain type of cell, um, get attracted to your esophagus due to the proteins that you're eating in certain foods. So, for example, I'm still currently allergic to all these foods. So I have celiac disease. So I don't eat gluten. I don't eat peas. I don't eat carrots, strawberries, raspberries, corn, potato, carrots, string beans. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm allergic to. So I kind of have an extremely strict diet. Um, and, I would say that obviously it was tough as a kid, wanting to eat all, the different things. Like, but specifically remember, I would probably say the hardest thing about being a kid was going to like certain events where people were able to share food, so like maybe birthday parties or family events, and like everybody would cater stuff. And like my parents, I have two amazing parents, Colleen and Paul. Um, and they would have to make meals for me every single time. Like it took that much of a commitment for my parents to not only make me feel comfortable, but that's just kind of what it took, in order to feel healthy and be able to function, because if I didn't ultimately decide to cut foods out or it didn't work, I would be on a feeding tube and I wouldn't be able to play football. So I told my parents that like there's no way I wanted to do that. I had these big dreams of playing college football, making the NFL, and that was just simply not an option, regardless of what I had to go through or what type of medication. So I had to take just a medication. It was called Flovent, which is basically an asthma medication. I had to do like 2 puffs a day for a certain amount of years. And then once I was stabilized, I haven't been on medication probably since I was in seventh grade, and really haven't had any issues. But obviously, just staying on top of everything, getting my blood checked. My health is obviously extremely important to me, like it should be for all people. But especially being a college athlete, you're putting your body through strenuous stuff. You want to make sure that you're able to function at a high level, especially, at the Power Five level, Group of Five, just FBS sports in general. So that's kind of just a little basis of, my story prior to college. It definitely made me who I am. It's given me a certain type of drive, a certain type of work ethic, and just because I was different off the rip, I knew it was going to be harder. I knew there was going to be challenges, and that's I strictly believe that's where I got my personality from, and that's why I'm successful, and that's why I'm at this level playing college football, is because of this type of stuff that I went through. And I would just say it was a blessing in disguise, even though there's a lot of dark moments. You learn so much from it. So
Man, that was truly inspiring. I sort of have two questions branching off that. You can tackle them however you want. First is, when did you know that you wanted to play college football, play in the NFL as a kid, or maybe when you started playing football? And then I'd love for you to just expand more on sort of the lessons you learned. You mentioned that this experience as a child drove you to be who you are today. I'd love to hear more about that.
yeah, absolutely. So I would say that football was kind of always my first love. I joined a flag football league, an NFL sponsored league, when I was like 4 years old. And the Cleveland Browns were my first team and my favorite team to this day, even though there's been lots of heartbreak because of that. But that's kind of where it came from. I just always kind of had a love for football. I had great people around me. I had a couple cousins. I had a cousin that played at Holy Cross. That kind of, I guess you could say, paved the way for playing in college. But there was people that I knew that played in college, but I always just fell in love with football. Um, my mom, she played pretty much everything. She's mainly just a competitive cheerleader. And then my dad, he played Division III soccer and tennis at Lynchburg in Virginia.
Yep.
So I was kind of, they made me try every sport, and I was like, I kind of love football. I fell in love with, just the hard aspect of it, the conditioning, and just that it prepared you for life even as a kid. Like, nothing, I knew that I could handle my medical issues because nothing was harder than those gassers, like in Pee Wee football. Like, just doing continuously hard stuff and uncomfortable stuff prepared, myself for the challenges that I would face. And I would just say, when it comes to your question about the lessons that I learned, I mean, there's so many lessons. Um, I would say I just had to be self-disciplined. That's one of the biggest lessons for sure. I mean, just to be able to go off to college, dealing with all this stuff to this day, and meal prepping and communicating with coaches and letting people know that I have food allergies and I have celiac and I have EOE. It takes a lot of self-discipline. I had to, but I shout out my parents because, once high school hit, there was no more them making meals consistently for me. I had to learn how to cook by myself, and obviously they would help me and coach me through that, but they wanted to prepare me for what life was going to be like in college. There was no way my parents were going to send me to the University of Oklahoma 25 hours away, being from New Jersey, if I wasn't prepared and if I wasn't able to handle myself and be an adult and make decisions to make myself feel comfortable, bring my EpiPens everywhere, stuff like that. So just as a kid, my parents instilled in me, the type of procedures and the type of plans that had to be in place in order to be successful, because if you don't have to deal with certain things, like food allergies or certain health struggles, you could kind of get it by sometimes by, maybe you forget something, but like when it comes to food allergies, you can't forget your EpiPens. You can't forget, um, the type of stuff that you need to bring in order to eat. That's just not an option, So those lessons from just the type of struggles that I went through definitely gave me a type of self-discipline. And I just had a drive, um, ever since. Like I just had a goal that I was gonna accomplish no matter what. No health issue or no, um, problem that I went through off the field was going to hold me back and not allow me to accomplish my dreams. Like even though I had to take medication and it altered it altered my development because I had to take it earlier on. Like there was a lot of cards stacked against me, but like there wasn't an option to be like I can't play in the SEC, I can't play FBS. Like obviously there was dark moments where I was like, I got to keep going, but I had my mind set and I was going to accomplish it. And that's kind of how I just was from, ever since I got diagnosed with celiac. Like something went off in my brain that was like, I'm going to do what people think I can't do, like, oh, this kid has food allergies. He'd probably be on a feeding tube. Like, even if he does play sports, like, who knows? Like, I made sure that I was able to gain weight, taking supplements, like the type of self discipline that it instilled in me, like I said, just made me who I was. And that's why I say it's a blessing in disguise because I firmly believe that if I didn't have the knowledge that I had from my parents and I didn't go through the challenges that I had, I wouldn't be the same exact person. There's just no way. It molded me, it shaped me, and now it gives me a platform to able to, speak about certain issues. Like for example, I'm super involved with, being an advocate with food allergies, through the Cured Foundation, which is for EOE research, and then Red Sneakers for Oakley is another organization that helps raise money for food allergy awareness, and shares Oakley's story, which is a story about how he tragically lost his life to food allergies, and his parents are great. They're constantly pushing for education. So it's also humbling to be able to share that and help others. I've got countless DMs from people about like, it's awesome that you played college football. Like you give my son hope, and like that makes me feel so good about myself. Not only just makes me feel good, it makes me it gives me a sense of purpose that like it's bigger than yourself, like someone's always watching. Like they see a kid with EOE, on the TV playing at Marshall or Oklahoma. Like that's you're able to be a lens or an inspiration to others, which is, that's why even though struggles are tough, but they allow you to connect with other people. So I mean, I've learned so much, and I feel like I've just grown up a lot. Like I said, and I'll keep saying it, my parents did a phenomenal job of raising me and giving me all the tools to be successful with the type of stuff I dealt with. So, I couldn't be more thankful for that.
That's amazing that you're able to give back and share your story. Another thing that you said that really jumped out to me was talking about self-discipline and how, given your experience, you were sort of your environment forced you to have self-discipline. And that self-discipline, I've always thought about this. I feel like everybody listening probably has dreams that they want in their life. Might be dream of going play in the NFL, or getting a certain job, or doing something hard to get something that you want, right?
Hmm.
There's always a point on that journey toward the dream where we have these dark times, where we have these points where our discipline is tested. And oftentimes that's where people sort of falter off and say, okay, my dream is not worth it, or maybe I don't think I can do it. And the discipline goes away. But then the other times, the rare times, the Odyssey is coming out, and I'm thinking about the hero's journey. I
Yeah,
don't, I don't know if you've seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet,
I've
but the
seen the
story,
trailer. I'm gonna see it this weekend, I think.
it looks good. But it's a good example. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it in grade school. But
Yep,
when you're tested to try and get to a point where you want to be, oftentimes it's your discipline that's tested. And you have to keep that discipline, and oftentimes you have to strengthen that discipline. Could you touch on, maybe, and you don't have to, but some of those times where you think that your discipline was really tested? And it could be in sports, it could be out of sports, but I'd love to hear about that.
definitely. I mean, I think there's multiple defining moments just throughout my life. I think obviously when I was first diagnosed, that's you got to look at yourself in the mirror and like plan out what you want to accomplish. Like I remember being a kid and be like, I want to play in college, I want to play in the NFL. And then, another defining moment was when I got the UE, like in fourth grade. That's another, like you said, you could take two paths. You could either keep going, you can, you know, rearrange, redirect, or you could just give up. So there's a lot of different paths. And I think ultimately the way you go depends on the type of people that are around you. And I think it really just depends also, just what your nature is. At the end of the day, I feel like some people have that drive instilled in them just from birth. They just like some people just know how to get hard things done. But like I said, having the right people around you, like my parents, like my friends, people that supported me, helped getting through those defining moments, made it a little easier, but just helped with guidance overall. Because, sometimes you don't understand exactly, I guess, what you need to do while you're in, I guess, quote unquote, a storm. Sometimes an outside perspective, like your parents, like your friends or other guys that play in college, help you through those moments. So I would say another maybe defining moment where that was kind of tested when I was in high school. I think I was going into my sophomore year. My head coach at St. Joseph Regional, which is a private Catholic school in the Big North in New Jersey. He ultimately left to go to Rutgers um, and become the tight ends coach. And I mean that was definitely a defining moment because I was like, do I stay or do I transfer? Because he had brought me in, and then I wasn't really sure what they were going to do with the new head coach, but ultimately I decided to stay. That turned out to be a good decision. Um, but I think also at the end of the day, when you make decisions, it's ultimately what you want. I would say another defining moment was, when I decided to go to Oklahoma. That was a defining moment too. The dream had become a reality, but now it's like you got there, what are you going to do with it? So that was definitely another defining moment. I think the first week of workouts at Oklahoma was a defining moment. That's like, yeah, this is the real deal. It's like you're in it now. So like this is what you want. There's it's a blessing to suffer. Like you used to pray for to be in rooms and workouts like this. This is a reality and you need to embrace it. So that there's lots of defining moments over the journey. And then, another defining moment when I decided to ultimately transfer. That was a huge defining moment. I have so much love for the University of Oklahoma. I still love that place. I go back to visit my old buddies, my old roommate. Still a linebacker there. Owen Heineke, he's a 6 year. Some of my boys are at Baylor. Some guys are at other places. But ultimately, I wanted to play more. That was a defining moment. And that was a tough decision. That was some. I had played a little bit, but I wanted a bigger role. And that place was awesome to me. So there's a lot of defining moments, but ultimately the way you determine where you want to go is ultimately what your goal is. When looking at a defining moment like transferring, it's like, what do I truly want? Do I am I looking for the best experience or am I looking for the biggest role? Am I looking to play? Am I looking to get closer to home? Ultimately for me, it was I wanted to play more. I had an amazing experience at University of Oklahoma. I played in a decent amount of games on special teams, but I just wanted a bigger role for myself. I knew I was capable of more. For whatever reason, it brought me to the revelation of entering the transfer portal. And now I ended up at Marshall and my role expanded. So it's like ultimately when you make decisions, when you decide to face those, defining moments, you need to look at what you truly want out of the, decision. And obviously consult people like your parents, loved ones, and people that just help making those defining moments um, easier to make, I would say. So
Oh, that was well said. No, another question, sort of stemming off that. I read in an article about sort of the new how nutrition came and played a role in your initial recruitment, and it didn't really touch up as much on Marshall as more at Oklahoma, but that's just a unique aspect that probably not many athletes go through. So I love to hear sort of how that journey came to fruition.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so you bring up nutrition. This was especially big, during the recruiting process, with having so much food allergies and stuff I need to manage. I need to go to a program that I knew had the resources to be able to handle that, be able to accommodate my needs. So instead, it caused me like when I start having these conversations with certain schools, I'm upfront about it. Like I tell them exactly, I got food allergies, like can you guys handle this? And like there was a lot of schools that were like, no, we can't. And just talking to certain schools and getting a feel for it, you reach a level of comfortability based on how you feel the conversation's going. You are able to understand if like they're being truthful, they're being honest. And like for me, it's I need full transparency because I can't get there and there be nothing in place. Like that's not going to work for me. Like with somebody that needs accommodations, needs a way to navigate it. So ultimately, when I was looking at the recruiting process, like Coach Venables, who's the head coach at Oklahoma, he was fantastic with, providing me with accommodations, with my food allergies and just ultimately making me feel so comfortable, like, not treating me any different because I had certain things that were unique about me, but being able to support me while also believing in me as a football player. Like he wanted me to achieve every type of goal that I had from a football and off the field perspective, which made me feel extremely comfortable. And I think that's a testament, honestly, just the man he is, the type of coach he is. Like he's a player coach, he loves his guys. And he honestly wants everybody to succeed. Doesn't matter if you're the number one guy or the 105th guy. Like you're a part of the team. He wants the best for you. So that was a huge factor in deciding ultimately, where to go. And also when I entered the transfer portal, you get reached out by certain schools and certain small schools may not be able to accommodate you, so like yeah, it would be great to play there, but like there's no meal plan, they can't accommodate food allergies, like it's going to be an uphill battle. And it's not that it's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be like I don't know if I could be the most successful there as a whole,
Yeah.
so like that definitely is another factor when looking at the transfer portal. And you know thank God I ended up at a place like Marshall that has systems in place that allow we have a dietitian that's able to communicate with me about meals during fall camp, in the dining hall and snacks and all that. So it's great that I was able to also find another place that was, so great in helping me, navigate my type of journey, my type of struggles, my health related stuff. And like I said before, it's definitely a blessing in disguise. But
Mm.
the early struggles, they were obviously tough, but once you turn that corner, like your life just gets so much better. As long as you're able to just be consistent and have self-discipline, like you don't have any issues. Like I haven't had issues in years with my food allergies or anything because I live by such a strict regimen and just a plan that allows me to stay healthy and just perform at my highest level. So
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome that there are schools that can accommodate for that because you don't only have to think about football. So I used to work for Sanford Soccer, Sanford University,
Yep.
small
In
colleges.
Alabama, right?
Yes, sir. Yep,
Yep.
in Birmingham. And like I was director of operations for the women's soccer team. And
Nice.
it was tough enough for players with no food allergies, right? Ordering on the road, getting food for after games,
Yep.
all of that. It's a lot of logistics and
Absolutely.
you might I mean, if you're just a fan and you're only watching the games, you might not think of all the support that happens
Absolutely.
around these teams. So that's wonderful that Marshall has stepped up in Oklahoma. Sounds like Oklahoma was absolutely phenomenal as
Yep.
well in their own right. So that's amazing to hear and probably inspiring, I think, to other athletes out there, whether they're playing football, lacrosse. I'm a lacrosse guy, so I got to mention
Yep.
lacrosse, track, basketball, whatever sport it is, soccer, that they know that there are universities out there who take it seriously and really put the
Absolutely.
athlete first. I love that, man.
Yeah, and I think will also help not only athletes, but just to teach, maybe athletes with food allergies or certain, health related issues like that you need to communicate, you need to be upfront with like during the recruiting process. Like this isn't something you can hide from
Mhm.
coaches. Like they need to know because in order for you to be your best, there needs to be stuff in place for you to feel comfortable. And I honestly like communication, especially with food allergies, is like the biggest thing. Like you can't be afraid to ask questions. I remember like this is just a thought, when I was talking about this, just popped in my brain. Like I remember that my parents, especially in like middle school and elementary school, I would have this allergy card. I'll actually go get it.
Okay.
I want to show you it.
Yeah.
Um, so. Here's the allergy card that my mom kind of created in elementary school, and it basically has a picture of me, kind of says a little bit about my story, and then it
Yeah.
has all my food allergies, my coach's numbers on the bottom. So basically, she created this idea that bring an allergy card to restaurants so I can give it to servers so it's easier. A chef can
Yeah.
literally use this behind the desk, and cook using it as reference. And they would
Yeah.
make me, order my own meals at like, fifth grade. I would be like, hey, I have food allergies, voice high pitched and stuff. Like, this is my allergy card. And that's kind of how I learned. My parents taught me that communication was huge. And, this honestly makes it so much easier for restaurants. Like, I think that everybody with food allergies or some type of serious, you know, issue should have something like this so people are aware. Like if you just give someone this, there's no, it's just it's very black and white. Like I'm allergic to this, avoid this, make sure you cook, with no cross contamination, things are separate. It allows things to be a lot smoother. So that's that just popped in my brain as we were talking about that. So I felt like I should share that.
No, dude, that's awesome and for listeners out there who might go through similar difficulties through their life. I think that's a great asset to have. You don't have to list everything out. You can just hand it over and makes things easier.
Absolutely.
Before we head out, this is the final question I have for you, and it's a question that I ask every guest who comes onto the show. In your life, how do you turn cancers into answers? Now, cancers, it's the metaphorical sense, the difficulties that we've gone through. So, a lot of the listeners out here for this podcast are here because they might have difficulties that they're going through,
Yep.
right? So, I think they would benefit greatly from hearing about the hard times you've gone through and what you've learned and how they can apply it to their own lives.
Absolutely. So how I would answer that question is I feel like, like you said, the cancers or the hard times in your life. I think that not only do they give you answers, but I feel like they reveal like who you truly are. I feel like a lot of people don't know who they are until they go through hard stuff. So for example, if you don't like for my instance, I was just a kid. I had celiac disease. Obviously, you're just trying to navigate. I knew I loved sports, but like you don't know who you really are and what you're really made of until you go through those things. Like after getting diagnosed and getting my life turned around and being successful in youth football, like it gave me answers that like this is a reality. I can do it. Like I'm strong. I'm a confident. Like this wasn't going to hold me back. So I would say like the biggest thing about the struggles in life is that like they truly just reveal who you are and what you're made of. And there's going to be times where it's going to break you. That's just life. That's just the truth, you know? Like you're going to get knocked down. Like there's going to be hurdles that, you know, it's not going to be easy, you know. My issues knocked me down so many times, you know. Uh there were a lot of dark moments like why can't I eat these things? Like, why don't certain people want to hang out with? Those are all realities of what I went through as a kid, but they ultimately, gave me answers about what I want to do, what I want to prove to myself, like that I can accomplish anything. I truly believe that like you can truly accomplish anything you set your mind to. Like if you're willing to sacrifice, you're willing to be disciplined, and honestly a little delusional, you have to be delusional about your goals. There's going to be a lot of people around you at first that don't think you could do it. And then as time goes on, you realize those people weren't meant to be around you. There's a reason that, and you're just able to navigate things, more. You have to believe in yourself. You have to, just work hard. And there's like the struggles just make you who you are. And I honestly, the people, and you can kind of see this in today's society, the people that don't go through a lot of struggles or don't know how to navigate things, is because they didn't go through struggles and they don't have coping skills. They don't know what it's like to get knocked down and get back up. Not saying that you should force struggles on yourself, but I'm saying that the struggles that you went through as a kid, regardless of what they are, health related, environmental related, it's not something to be ashamed of. It makes you who you are, and it gives you an enhanced perspective. Like, I truly believe nobody wants it more than me, because football was taken away from me as a kid. I wasn't able to play when I was sick. I couldn't, I was in and out of doctors, so it gave me a bigger purpose. So like just stepping on the field even 15 years later is a blessing, because I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't, who knows what was supposed to happen in that operating room? Who knows if I was supposed to make it to the next level? Like, all the cards were stacked against me. So it's just a matter of discovering who you are. And ultimately, I feel like the struggles allow you to find your purpose. Like I know for a fact that the dream's the NFL, absolutely. That's the pinnacle of playing football. But I know that ultimately I want to coach, college football. I want to help develop young men. I want to help, instill the journey and what I went through in them, allow them to navigate and pour into them and help them navigate. So it's allowed, my struggles have allowed me to be like, this game of football has given me everything. Like it's given me, purpose. It's given me, an ability to inspire others. So like that's my purpose. My purpose is to talk about my food allergies and help other people navigate it and help instill in others with the game of football. And that's ultimately why, I want to continue to play and I want to, coach one day. So
Man, that was extremely well said. I'm honestly so happy that we connected on Instagram direct messages. So happy that you responded and were able to carve out time of your busy schedule to come on the show and speak. I think that a lot of people listening are going to be inspired, and they've all got different backgrounds of different things that they're going through. However, there are so many core central messages that you touched up on that I think can apply to anybody's life. So thank you for coming on, being vulnerable enough to share, and also inspiring others out there.
absolutely. Thanks for having me. You have one remarkable story yourself, so I'm just glad that we're, able to, inspire people and give them, the ability to keep going regardless of what's going on, and just, be a light, because, a lot of people need it if they don't have the support around them. So
I couldn't agree more. Well, everybody out there listening, just keep grinding, turn your cancers into answers, and have a great rest of your week.